You test it. Are we
Yeah. Hi, y'all. Good morning, early afternoon. Welcome to Blogging Today, What You Need to Know and What's Next. I'm Zoe Triska. I'm the Associate Books Editor at the Huffington Post. We deal with lots of bloggers all the time. I hope most of you know that. Our speakers today are Erica Barmash, the Senior Marketing Manager at Harper Perennial and Harper Paperbacks, Patrick Brown, the Community Manager at Goodreads, Jen Lancaster, author-blogger at jensylvania.com, and Candace Levy, who's an editor and a blogger at Beth Fish Reads. I thought I'd let them talk a little bit about what they do specifically, as they can probably speak to that better than I can.
So I guess I'll start. I'm the marketing manager at Harper Perennial and Harper Paperbacks, which are imprints of HarperCollins. So as part of my job, I, along with someone named Regina Eckes, who some of you might know, do all of our outreach to bloggers, trying to help you guys review our books and get you what you need. I'm also responsible for all of the advertising for the imprint, all of the social media, and a lot of other more boring things.
I'm Patrick Brown. I'm the community manager at Goodreads, and my job is sort of broadly to make sure that people are having a good time on the site, and that includes some sort of moderating of discussion boards, things like that. I also work a lot with authors and publishers to help them use the site in a promotional capacity in a way that's fun for our members and hopefully gets them results as well. And increasingly, I find that I'm dealing with a lot of bloggers in my job because we have a ton of bloggers on Goodreads. So that's pretty much what I do in a nutshell.
I'm Jen Lancaster, and I'm an author and a blogger. I'm one of the first generation of bloggers to make the leap to publishing, but I still have a very active hand in the blogging world.
I'm Candace Levy. I blog as Beth Fish Reads. I came into blogging the other direction. I've been a freelance book editor since the 80s. And in 2008, decided to get more involved with book reviewing and started my blog there.
So in case you don't know how this works, first I'll just launch into questions, and then the last 15 minutes I'll open up the floor to y'all and take some questions from you. So first of all, how is the relationship between bloggers and publishers changing? What do bloggers and publishers need to do to create good relationships together?
I'll start with that. I think that as the blogging community has grown, even from when I started in my job a few years ago, there was a lot of within our publishing house, sort of those of us who knew about blogging and worked with bloggers kind of having to convince a lot of other people of the value of blogging, and even in some cases tell them what it was and explain it at a very basic level. So I think we're pretty much past that now. I think from, at least at Harper, from the bottom to the top level, people know what book bloggers do, they know what book blogs are, and they know the effect it can have. So I think now we're sort of at a level where everybody has a system for how they work with bloggers and how they get books reviewed, and it's becoming more about, what else can we do together? What kind of arrangements with authors can we help bloggers make? Like, can we help them do more interviews, go to more events, help them get involved with their local bookstores, do features on our imprints or things like that? Like, I think it's moving much beyond just the review, and that's something that's unique to blogging as opposed to traditional reviews.
What should the ethics of the relationship be?
I mean, I think that it's kind of like, I feel like I've probably said this before, but a lot of it is just be a nice, polite person. I think that most people know that, publishers are not going to pay you for reviews and things like that. It's, and vice versa. I think the only expectation is getting a book for free to consider for a review. And I think that's that part of the relationship most people are aware of. I think it's just a matter of being aware of the time constraints too on every side, both on the publisher side, like working with bloggers isn't my only job. It's one of the parts of my job that I like, but sometimes, I have to spend a whole day dealing with why is this book not in our warehouse in the place it's supposed to be? And in terms of blogging, most bloggers have other things that they're doing as well, whether they're other day jobs or, taking care of their children or whatever. So it's just a matter of being respectful of the time on both ends.
Can I add something to that? And I think most bloggers in return at least like an acknowledgement. And I think it's very hard sometimes to work with publishers who on the surface are very excited to send you their books or to maybe even approach you to review. And you get your review out there and there's no response. And you send your link in and you DM them, it's up today, and nothing. That's kind of discouraging. And I don't think bloggers expect a lot. I mean, they're not expecting to become best friends with the author and, be wined and dined, but they do. So there is an expectation in the other direction as well.
I actually think the ethical part of it, to me, has always seemed like it falls into place just in common sense, that what makes blogs so compelling to people and what makes them interesting to read is their perceived independence and the idea that their opinion is their opinion. And if it were bought, I think that would lose a lot of value for the blogger. So I think it ends up being a self-preservation that you don't go down any kind of weird path like that. And on Goodreads, we encourage bloggers to cross-post the reviews they post to their blog, but we don't allow any reviews that are paid for. There's pay-for-review services, and if we find out about them, we remove them from the site. So I think that's a big difference for.
And I'm sure this is a question that everyone's wondering about. Does book blogging actually influence book sales?
I can speak to this. Why was that funny? No, I can't. I'm an author. I'm a blogger. Okay, here's the thing. At the end of the day, I'm a reader. And it's so exciting for me to read a good book that when I read something and I like it, maybe the author is a friend of mine, maybe it's just something that I found in the bookstore, maybe it's an advanced copy, I tell everybody about it. And I think I don't want to say, oh, my opinion is more valuable because people know that I'm buying these books, but I only write about things that I love, and I've never done any sort of advertising on my website. So I think in my talking about books, people understand that no one's behind me trying to push this. If I share something that I love, it's because I really love it. Every year I put out a winter reading list, a summer reading list, and I'm really willing to consider any book. I mean, if it's exciting to me, I want to share it with my readers because hopefully they'll like the same thing.
On a different level, not talking necessarily about consumer sales, but talking about when we as a publisher are trying to get bookstores to purchase the books, blogging can help there too. A lot of bookstores have relationships with bloggers, and so they look to that blogger that they work with to provide recommendations or to sort of tip them off to things that might be being talked about a lot online. And it's just another way to show booksellers that there are people who are already excited about the book even before it comes out. Just another way to differentiate it from the thousands of other books that are out there.
Goodreads doesn't sell books, so I don't have any access to book sales, but I do have access to stats about books, how many people are adding a book to their shelf, and I strongly believe that those correlate very closely to sales. So if you look at a book that gets mentioned on Fresh Air, for instance, you'll see a big spike in the number of people who add it to their shelf. Well, I don't think there are that many blogs that drive, they don't quite have the reach of that, but I think what blogging does is it's kind of like a beginning of a grassroots campaign. It's the beginning of word of mouth. And the fact that it often happens before the book comes out is huge for books. So while I can't argue firmly that it influences sales, I can say that it influences word of mouth, which ends up helping with discovery, which is the big problem for publishers and authors, that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of books out there, and getting your book talked about in any way is a big deal. So I think it's more that there's this aggregate of all these different people out there talking about the book, and that builds to something. And I think you can see that actually with a book like 50 Shades of Grey, that book, look, I know, but I've done a lot of research on that book. I made an infographic that maybe some of you saw, and
We posted on a HuffPost.
Cool, thank you, yes, I saw that. See, acknowledgement. And I really looked at, you know, it's easy to see, okay, it was nominated for a Goodreads Choice Award, and it went from having a couple hundred people a day adding it to a couple thousand people a day adding it, and then it was mentioned on the Today Show, and it went to a couple 10,000 people a day adding it, and it just took off from there. But how did it get to the point where it was nominated for a Goodreads Choice Award? And I think the answer was really early. It was bloggers that were driving word of
Writing
mouth on that
crops.
book. Yeah, and and basically it was that, and then large groups on Goodreads, which often are full of bloggers as well, really driving like a lot of word of mouth, and yeah, so.
I have a question for the bloggers. What can bloggers do to get their content seen by the greatest number of people?
I'll talk to that. I think it's very individual, but what has happened, what I've noticed on my own blog is that my blog is almost all books, but it's not all books. And I post a photograph every week that I've taken, and I have a feature on the weekends on cooking and food books. And I have seen an enormous, just in my own little world, crossover. So people I met through photographs have come to my blog and said, oh, I love to read. And now they're commenting on my reviews. And same with the food. I've met people through food blogs who then later respect or like my cookbook reviews, and so then want to see what else I'm doing. So I think a good way to reach out to beyond the book blogging community, which sometimes you feel like you're reviewing these books, and the only people who are reading them are people who are already going to buy that book or read that book or already knew about it, is to expand your own little microcosm. And I, you know, I mean, I'm just one person. I'm sure I'm not making any great
I
difference.
think diversity has been great on every site. I think that is definitely
But I think that's a big draw, is when you're doing something that attracts other people.
definitely.
Something that I've seen, something that's been very effective for me, whether I'm talking about my own books, whether I'm talking about my friends' books, or just what's exciting to me, is just cross-platform. The people who come to my Facebook page aren't necessarily the people who read my Twitter page or come to my blog. So I do some cross-posting just to see what gets people talking. I mean, I have access to the analytics from each of those things, so I can see which has been the most effective. And I think that I found that my blog is the most effective in getting people to actually read the content. On Facebook, a lot of times, people look at the pictures and then have a comment and don't necessarily read the content of what I've written. So I think right now, for me, the blog is the best way to get information across for people who really want to read it.
And on that note, are y'all both using social media? What kind of social media are you using, and how are you noticing that the readers are different, maybe on different platforms?
Well, I definitely think with Facebook, there's less comprehension. People are more likely to react. I didn't mean that to sound mean, but people are more likely to react emotionally with Facebook, and I'm not sure why that is. But it reaches more people, but I think it's less effective.
I think I don't use Facebook that much, although I do have a Facebook account under my blog, and I have a Tumblr account. I have I sign up for everything, early adapter, and then most of that just goes by the wayside because nobody else is really using it. But Twitter, to me, is the key.
Yeah.
And I have found that Twitter drives a lot of traffic. StumbleUpon has driven a ton of traffic. And you can't go by the number of comments you have. I can have a post that has 1,500 views, 1,500 hits with enough time. They've stayed long enough that at least they're pretending to read it. But maybe I'll only have 4 comments.
Right.
But I have found Twitter and StumbleUpon have been my 2 biggest draws, besides regular Google Reader and the book blogging community.
And speaking of comments, what can book bloggers do to reach outside their own community and to engage community? And
just be a part of the community, I think. I mean, I really don't have any other.
what about you, Patrick? Do you
Yeah, so I mean, community is in my title, so I know all about community. No, I mean, I think the point of diversifying is that not so much that you're covering things outside of books, but that you're remembering to write for a reader who maybe doesn't always read book blogs. One of the things I noticed when I was a judge for the Book Blogger Awards. You can throw things at me later if you want. Please don't harm the other panelists.
I was also a judge, so I can throw
You can harm Erica and I. But one of the things I noticed is that sometimes I would land on a blog and I would have to scroll for many, many posts before I found something that looked like a review or an interview or something that was like writing I could recognize. There were a lot of like giveaways where they were linking to another blog and that blog would link back to them, and there were these very kind of complicated schemes that I'm sure probably do increase traffic, but I think they were a little bit alienating to, like, I don't read tons and tons and tons of book blogs, I read some. So if I wasn't a member of that community that was obviously engaging in this, I was like, I don't know that this is content for me, you know? And I think that's a big thing about the internet, is that there's content out there all the time, and it's like, who's the content for? And thinking maybe once a week and being like, making sure once a week you're writing something where you're like, if I had never seen this blog before, this post is like what I'm about, you know? And keeping that in mind when you're thinking about what you're gonna write about for that week, and making sure that there's at least one thing in there that's like really meaty and really interesting and you know, interesting to someone who's outside that blogging community. So I also think you could join Goodreads, and I mean, this is a self-selecting piece of information, but because I was gonna be on this panel, I sent some emails to book bloggers I know who are on Goodreads and said, you know, do we drive traffic to you? Like, what do you use Goodreads for? And they said, you know, I don't use Goodreads necessarily to get traffic, but like at least 2 blogs said of the people that I, you know, get referrals from, you're number 1 at the moment. And for one of them, that constituted 20% of their traffic. And I think that, you know, people are using it in different ways, and they're like cross-posting their reviews, but they're also joining groups, they're meeting other bloggers. So, you know, your blogging community can become a little silo, and hopefully Goodreads or any of these other social media sites get you outside of that a little bit to maybe a slightly different silo that's next door to your silo or something, and you can kind of grow in that direction. Actually, I wanted to just touch briefly on the Facebook thing. I write most of the blog posts for the Goodreads blog. And I think since Facebook changed the way whatever their algorithm is that selects posts, that it's so image focused now that if you're not going to post something that has a strong image that you know people are going to react to, it's going to be lost. It's going to be just noise on Facebook.
People love the infographics. You're doing a really great job with that, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons that we started to focus on those, is we found that if we were posting something and it had no image, it was just dying on Facebook. And so images seem to be driving that, you know, I mean, obviously much more than they are on something like Twitter, but even more than they were 6 months ago on Facebook,
So besides diversity and image-driven posts, what is the best way to engage the community of readers that you already have, do you find?
I try to provide something different every time that I post. I know there are a lot of bloggers out there who feel compelled to post something every single day because people are expecting new, fresh content. I don't post every day because I don't always have something new to say. Not everyone wants to see what I had for breakfast, and I know there are blogs like that. There's one blog that I hate read that's all about the oatmeal this girl eats every day. Is it okay to admit to hate reading? Sure. But I try to keep it fresh by only posting when I feel inspired.
I have kind of a rhythm to my blog, and I figure the people who are interested in those particular aspects of what I write about will be sure to be there on a certain day. So on Wednesdays, my photograph, on the weekends, my food, on Fridays, I promote the imprints that I really like, and I do reviews on the other days. So, what was the original
So keeping a schedule for you
right.
keeps your community engaged.
Yes, I hope so. It's still growing, so I guess I'm doing something okay.
Yes. And how have you developed your own specialty or voice to stand out from all the other bloggers? Because there are so many. Both of you.
I got lucky because I was one of the first. I mean, I wasn't the first blogger, but I was one of the first people who started keeping a weblog. I didn't know that I had a blog for 6 months. I thought I just had a website where I would put diary entries in. I mean, the technology caught up with me. I mean, I feel like I have been very lucky to have been at the very forefront of the industry, because I'm not sure that I necessarily would have gotten published now. Part of when I was when I first started writing was nobody was doing this on the web, and I think that my medium really was the message. And now, I'm not sure what's next. I really don't know. I can't put up pictures of my breakfast. That's not what I do.
Right. But if you do what is you, that's the thing. So whether you're all about reviews, whether you're about talking about your kids, whether you're about talking about your book club, I think the main thing is you have an authentic voice, you have your own opinions, you're not rewriting other opinions. You're talking about, well, like the keynote speaker, Jennifer, said, if you you write about what you like. I mean, I write negative reviews, but but because I want to write about what I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just writing about what I want everybody else to read. I just want to write about what I'm reading.
People
But
find that authentic.
right, but I think that's it. If you have your own voice and you write decently and you proofread and you make sure what you're writing is legible and understandable, then that's a really important thing.
Definitely. And this question is for all of you. How are ebooks changing the concept of community for the book world in general?
I mean, obviously they are, but I think on a personal level, you know, there's still so many people who are reading only in print or who find, I know personally, I find that I can still engage in the community on Goodreads or on the book blogs that I read, and it's very format agnostic. You know, I read Candace's blog. I actually don't know if she has an e-reader. It's the kind of thing where you're there to find out about the content and to find out what people thought of the actual book. And unless it was a type of book where it was like a new format or, you know, something like, can you use this cookbook on your iPad? Is it functional to do that? If it's just straight up fiction or nonfiction, I think that a lot of people don't care. And, you know, I think that personally, if there's a book that I think I'm really gonna love, I still prefer to buy it in print so that I can share it with people. And even if, you know, we get to a point where it's very easy to share ebooks, I don't know that I would do that because it's not the same as like physically placing a book in someone's hands and saying like, I love this, now I'm giving you my copy that I treasure and you have to take care of it and give it back to me. You know, I think there's something special about that will stay around.
For me, I read a decent amount of ebooks because of the convenience factor. But recently I was on book tour and I bought a physical book and I was reading it and I was in bed and I have a propensity for being lazy and I got tired of using two hands, so then I downloaded the same book on my Kindle so I could lie down. No, come on, other people have done that. And what was so interesting to me is because I was going back and forth between the hardcover and the Kindle that I got so much more out of the actual book. I found myself having to reread things on the Kindle because it didn't have the same look and feel as the book. I'm certainly not a Luddite, and I appreciate new technology, but it made a difference. And for my own personal writing, I started off in 2006, and my big thing was using the footnote. And people weren't using footnotes, they were using footnotes the way they were supposed to back in 2006, but I started it with just like little snarky asides. And that was one of the things that I really did to differentiate myself as an author. Now I'm finding myself having to change the way that I write because half of everyone, they don't know how to operate they don't know how to get the footnotes on their iPad. It's difficult, so we're having to reformat the books. So something that my publisher is doing to make the actual book more of an experience, the next one that I have coming out, it's going to have colorful end papers, it's going to have actual print on the hardcover, be underneath the paper, so it's going to be much more of an experience. So I think that if people don't buy the physical book, they're really going to be missing out on something.
I find it's much harder for me personally to review books that are on an e-reader. I can't flip back and forth. I can't tag all my, quotes I might want to use in a review or facts. Like my books are filled with sticky note flags of, the person's name, where the city is, how old they are. That's the editor and me. Flag everything so that when I go to write my post, it's all right there. Also, when I discuss books with people, like in a book club situation, I like to be able to flip not, try to remember what page or run a search for a word. I do actually own an e-reader. But, when you travel, I mean, what
Yeah,
could be
right.
more convenient? So I have no objections to it, but I haven't, it's not the same experience yet.
You know what I'm wondering, though? I'm wondering if 50 Shades of Grey, I'm sorry to come back. I know it's almost a tired subject at this point. But part of the reason that book picked up so much, I think, is because women could read it on the e-readers on the subway and no one would know what they were reading. And I wonder almost if that book got picked up in general so much because people could read it on an e-reader. What do you think about that?
I bought my Kindle, and the first book I bought was, forgive me, it was Lauren Conrad's. And I was reading it on the beach, and no one knew what I was reading. It was right when Kindles first came out, and someone asked me what I was reading. Oh, I'm reading The Sun Also Rises. No, I was reading Candy.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was at a hotel pool recently, and there were tons of people reading paperbacks of 50 Shades, which I thought was awesome. I was like, you go.
Was it in
you
New
know?
York, though? They probably want you to know
No,
what
it
they're
was
reading.
in Palm Springs. It was very nice. No, I don't know. I think the biggest thing with ebooks to me is the speed with which you can get them. That's like, I don't know that it's had a big impact on communities. I mean, I guess there's an interesting, how many of you are familiar, may not be the right, I don't know, but there's this interesting little bookstore called Emily Books that sells one book a month, basically, and they really just, they feature one single book. And it's an ebook that it's usually been published by somebody else, and they're just selling the ebook of it. But what I think is interesting is it's really just geared towards, it's not a book club, you don't get together and discuss the book, but it's all built around the brand of the people who run it and their taste, and it's like you're part of this little thing if you're buying books from them. But what I like about it is that I almost buy the book, I always get it almost immediately when I get an email about it, and then I have the book at that moment, and I find I usually read it on the bus on the way home. And I think that, like, immediacy is the biggest thing that, you know, like, I keep waiting for there to be some sort of technological advance that will have a big impact on, like, how I read. Like, I like, oh, it'd be cool if I were reading this book, and then I could instantly pull up all the blog posts about this book. And it's like, in practice, it doesn't really happen. Like, you got to close the app, and then you open Safari, and you Google it, and then you find, you know, it's like that. It's just not working yet. I think maybe in a few years there'll be somebody who makes this really great seamless reading experience where you can either just read the book or you can read the book and then pull in all this extra stuff if you want, but it hasn't happened yet, in my opinion, so.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, you know, people always talk about how when people are reading on e-readers, you can't see what they're reading, but I still look at the
I do
person
too.
next to me
I
and
do
see
too.
what they're reading all the time. And I'm not ashamed of it at all. And actually, on a train recently, I looked over and saw that the woman was reading a Harper Collins book, and I thought, oh, how nice. And then a few minutes later, I looked over, and she had stopped reading it and changed to a different book. And I was like, that's my punishment for being nosy.
This is a question for all of you as readers, you as bloggers. People have tried and failed to create a code of conduct for blogs. Are there any ethical codes that you've personally applied to blogs or that you look for in blogs? Do you think there should be codes of norms so readers know they can trust what they're reading?
I can answer this. This is more of a problem on my Facebook page than on my actual blog. I don't want people to fight with each other. I don't want to feel like I'm driving a minivan and I'm trying to slap people behind me. So I have, this is you know what this is? This is what I call my hand of God. And this hand of God works the block button. So if you can't conduct yourself in a manner that doesn't incite everyone else around you, you get to say, you're welcome to disagree, but the minute you start picking fights or get hypercritical, hand of God, you're done. So that is my code of conduct. And then I get people who want to argue with me about the First Amendment, and I think, oh, honey, I don't think the Constitution means what you think it means. So that's how I deal with it.
There have been in the blog world at various times people who want to create a document and have people like virtually sign it and put a little button on their blog, and that's great for other people. But I kind of, for me personally, I know that I'm a person of integrity, and I think that comes through if you read my reviews and know that what I'm writing is my own opinion, and that's good enough for me. I mean, for my personal blogging, I don't need to sign anything to prove that I am an honest person. On the other hand, when I find that people are plagiarizing or blatantly taking material from other sources, whether I've discovered that myself or it's been exposed, I tend to no longer want to read that blog. And I find it hard, people have to make their own decision. I find it hard to believe that other people are more forgiving than I am. But maybe it's because I am in the industry, that part of my job is to find plagiarism, that I'm very harsh.
Yes.
And speaking from a publisher point of view, if I found out that a blogger was plagiarizing, I certainly wouldn't ever want to work with them again. I feel like recently there's been some plagiarism scandals where it gets very, very personal about the person who plagiarized and like they're a terrible person, how could they do this? And I mean, everybody knows, or for the most part, everybody knows that plagiarism is wrong and people do it anyway, and it's not personal. It's up to you if you want to keep reading that person's blog. But definitely from a publisher standpoint, that's not the kind of person that we would want to be involved with, because if they can't realize that that rule applies to them on something so black and white as plagiarism, it makes you think that there's probably going to be other issues as well.
Yeah, and I think also that just from a purely self-serving point of view, that you don't want that person talking up your book in a way, like, not that you throw a fish back, so to speak, but like, you don't want, if they're a person whose reputation is tarnished, like their recommendation is kind of tarnished too. I mean, I actually think readers are pretty savvy in general, that you can tell when somebody's completely full of it, or at least I feel I can. And, yeah, I mean, plagiarism might be different because I may not know that they plagiarized, but yeah, I mean, I kind of think that sort of thing is self-regulating, and that the system that's I mean, there is no system in place, but the lack of a system seems to work fine most of the time, I think. I don't know.
Okay. Is making a living from blogging a realistic prospect? And is that something you see developing even more as book blogging progresses as a part of the future of book blogging?
Well, I've never actually made any money from my blog directly, but if I hadn't had a blog, then I wouldn't have a career, so I think it's absolutely viable.
And for me, I've been a freelance editor, like I said, since the 80s, but I've gotten involved with freelance reviewing and other forms of journalism about books through people contacting me because of what I write on my blog. So.
Okay. Do blogs have a lifespan?
That's a great question that I would like to know the answer.
So I used to write a food blog. I don't anymore. It's still there. You could go read it. I mean, I think I don't find, I mean, there are blogs that I read 6-7 years ago that I still read today, and there are plenty that I stopped reading for whatever reason. I don't even know if they're updating them anymore. But I mean, I think it ends up being up to the author, and it's partially like maybe, no one ends up, if your traffic completely goes away or something, you don't feel like writing for yourself anymore, you could stop. But I kind of think it's entirely, I mean, I think I go through life cycles as a reader where I'm like, I'm more interested in this blog right now than another one, but I don't really see how a blog could say, to say the life of this blog is over. I guess there are more structured blogs where it's like, for a year, I'm gonna write about this, and then I'm done. But that would be a different animal than just an ongoing book blog. So.
Okay, I'm gonna open up the floor up to you guys. Does anyone have any questions for anyone on the panel? You'll have to speak up really loudly, like yell almost.
I think in terms of comments, I mean, you look at the comments on any major sites, like Grantland is one of my favorite sites, and even on a site like that where the comment is tied to your actual Facebook page with your actual real name that someone could click on and see where you live and everything, people still say things that are just insane and get in arguments that are completely insane. So I think as a blogger, you know, you can only be responsible for so much of the comments. You know, I think you can be responsible for not inciting people to get into crazy arguments. But if they do, you know, you can decide to delete comments, certainly, but you can also leave them, and I think people are aware that you are not responsible for what people say. In terms of ethics, you know, it's the same as if a journalist for the New York Times was found to be plagiarizing, it would be a scandal that ended that person's career. And I think we're getting to that same place with blogging where people aren't just going to shrug it off, or at least a lot of people are not just going to shrug it off.
I have two questions. One, with it's kind of related to the plagiarism. You know, we're all very concerned as writers about plagiarism of our words. Yet there seems to be kind of a much more laissez-faire attitude when it comes to photography and graphics, which you know, we don't seem to worry quite so much about thinking those guys will mind if we use their work. What do you all feel on that? Because again, I would think if you took away all the stuff that people are using and posting that is that they don't own the copyright for, you know, that would be quite a bit of a little upheaval, I think.
I guess it would depend on the blog. I don't really think there's anything on my blog, for example, that I'm using inappropriately. If you have your own images on your blog that you're worried about, of course, anybody can technologically probably change this, but I put a watermark on all my photos. I have Google alerts. There's photography alerts to see if somebody's using your work. I mean, there's only so much you can do.
I guess what I'm saying is, do we have the same revulsion to it that we say, oh, well, we wouldn't read that blog if we knew they were plagiarizing?
No.
Will we read? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I
Yeah.
see what you're asking.
Both ways, it should go both ways.
Right.
Right. I see what you're
I
asking.
guess in a lot of ways with images, at the Huffington Post, we are not allowed to use anything. With anything from Goodreads that we get, we ask for permission to use from them. We don't use any infographics without attributing and asking first. We could get sued.
Yeah, I mean, you know, with, well, one, on the Goodreads blog, I mean, I look for stuff on Flickr that's got, you know, an open license or whatever, and then I credit back the photographer. And it's pretty easy to do, and usually you can find good stuff that
Yeah.
way. If we have to use a photograph. With the infographics, we actually learned the hard way that, so we did one about Twilight, and it went a lot of places, and it had a map on it, and that was the only thing that most people were interested in. It had other stuff, but they cut the map out of the infographic. And they would still link back to us, but it's like, we want to get our brand out there. That's what, you know, that's one of the reasons we do these. So for the 50 Shades one, I made sure that we put our logo in a way that you couldn't crop it out.
Right.
You know? And it's
That's
like,
what I
and
do.
then it's like, hey, cut it out, share it, do what you want. You know what I mean? That's the point of putting it up on the web, is to get people to share it, and I want it to spread around. I mean, I'm not going to be upset if someone talks about my post, you know, as long as they've got our logo in there.
And my only second question, you mentioned the fact that Twitter had really was you thought very forceful in getting both exposure for your blog and connecting maybe with, as you were saying, with the other groups. What short review posts? I apologize, I'm not familiar with what you're posting on Twitter, but what do you think's been most effective on Twitter? Because I really see people say, like, I still don't get it, and then to hear you be such a proponent for it, I'm just curious.
I'm kind of a talkative, friendly person. I don't just talk about books. I don't just talk about my blog. I tweet what I posted that day. Usually, I get up at like 5 in the morning, so I tweet like once very early in the morning and once when the publishers get into work around 9 o'clock, and that's pretty much it in terms of posting my own content, unless I'm really excited about something that I did. I just engage. You just engage, and like any, as the keynote speaker said, it's like being at a big cocktail party. So if at first that group isn't responding, you come up with something else to say, or you find someone else to talk to, and it's just, that was what it was for me. I have no secret. And as people got to know me, they were interested in what I was writing, and that's what brought people to my blog.
We have time for one more question, and that's it. You in the front? The question is, should we be using Google+.
I have strong feelings about that. Go ahead.
I haven't done anything on Google Plus because I'm still mad about MySpace. So I'm sticking with what's working right now. The Google Plus I haven't heard enough about yet.
I felt uncomfortable about the Google Plus terms of service and copyright issues and other things, so I am not on it either.
And I'm going to say no, too, on that. Do not, it really, no one's on Google+. Everyone's using Facebook. They tried, they failed. Facebook is going to be the medium that everyone's using. And this is from someone who is, I have to know everything about all the tech stuff, so just saying.
Google Plus, everybody should be on Google Plus. It's tied into the world's biggest search engine.
Well, agree to disagree. That's all we have time for today. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.